Hi everybody, welcome to yet another video. So today we're having a little look at, it's a little project I did actually. I'll put a link in the description and you can see the finished project. But this was a tank I originally did a couple of years ago for someone. And they basically scratched it with a tank bag, magnetic tank bag and things like that. Magnetic tank bag are the #1 culprit of rubbish. If you pick up a little bit of metal on the magnets and then you attach it to the tank, you don't realise it moves around and vibrates around, and before you know it, you've got little scuff marks and that on the tank. Anyway, cut a long story short, he said, could I do it again, and could I put like a little bit of artwork on the tank? Now I use the word artwork very, very loosely because I'm no artist. I wouldn't for 1 minute pretend that I'm an artist. But yeah, I mean, that's how he described it. I'll put a link in the description if you want to see how it actually turned out. But to get to the stage of applying the, as I say, loosely worded artwork, I like to put a few coats of base coat on it to cover up any little marks that are there, and then I'll put a couple of coats of clear coat, and then we'll sand the clear coat down after a couple of days, leave it another couple of days, so 3-4 days altogether, and then you can start doing any stencil work you've got to do. And if you make a mistake, you can just rub it out, and it just gives you more insurance really. And it gives me a chance to like try different guns and things like that. So the idea of today was to use the GTI Pro Lite, or the Pro Lite as it's called now, all the same gun, the Tekna Pro Lite, GTI Pro Lite, and the Pro Lite, the Devilbiss Pro Lite as it's called now. They're all exactly the same gun, nothing different about them at all. And the old GTI, sorry, not GTI, the old GTI Pro, that is the same gun as well, although they did, as far as I know, they changed it in about 2010. But after 2010, 2011, as far as I know, the caps, tips fit exactly the same as they would do on a GTI Pro Lite or a Tekna Pro Lite, but the needles are different because the GTI Pro Lite or Tekna Pro Lite has effectively a single actuation for the needle and the air control, whereas the original GTI Pro actually has a separate air control valve and a separate way of pulling the needle back, so they work separately. So the needle is obviously different, but otherwise they're exactly the same, and they spray the same as well. The GTI Pro Lite by its very nature is slightly lighter. It's because they've done away with a couple of the components, although people do say that the GTI Pro is actually more reliable because it's got 2 separate components. I've never had any trouble with either. I have actually got a GTI Pro, although mine's quite a late one. I think mine's 2018, I think it is, so it's quite a late one. But the idea of doing this video was, I got a Sata CC, a Sata 1.3 cc, and I did again, I'll try and remember to put a link in the description. I did a couple of videos with it, and it is a very, very good gun and lays clear coat very, very flat. And the T110 is also capable of giving a really flat finish to clear coat, although I use it with the 1.2. Now, the 1.3 cc Sata actually has an internal diameter of 1.15 millimeter. So that got me thinking, is it just the fact that they're restricting the material flow, so the less material you flow through the gun, bear in mind the amount of air going through the cap is exactly the same, that's causing it to have better atomization? So I thought, well, what about trying a 1.1 as opposed to my normal 1.2 that I would use with the T110 cap, and see whether that gives you a flatter finish than the 1.2 would give you. So that's the idea of this video. I did say at the time when I was trying the CC that I did want to see how that would actually work in practice with a few other guns. Now it's a matter of getting the tips really, because I need to try the Sata CC with a 1.1 RP tip in it to see whether it, it's the tip that's actually making more of the difference than the cap. But back to the GTI Pro or the Pro Lite Devilbiss. that's the idea of this video. So we're using a 1.0 tip with the T110 cap. Now, as far as I know, a lot of people can't get this in the US, the T110 cap in the US, because it doesn't comply with emission regulations. Having said that, you can get, well, I presume you know that you can get them from somewhere like Spray Guns Direct. They send to the US. So you can actually get these caps, and they do give a flatter finish than certainly the TE20. The TE25, which is a HV25 cap over here, I'm still using and getting used to, although that actually produces quite a good finish. It's a bit of a hybrid, that cap, but this probably still produces the best flattish finish of any of these, you know, the Tekna caps. So if you've got a Tekna Pro Lite, the T110 cap for a Devilbiss Pro Lite will obviously fit, because it's exactly the same. Although if the EPA come along, they would probably fill your collar, because you're not allowed to, technically you're not allowed to use them. But yeah, we get away with it here in the UK and Europe. So we get access to these caps, and they actually are very, very good. But the idea, as I say, is to try and see whether restricting the flow actually has any benefits to it. So we used it for base coat, which is what we did now. It actually works very well for base coat. The TE10 is a very similar cap. It's just got short, sorry, the TE10 has longer air horns. This has shorter air horns. But otherwise they're very, very similar. They flow a very similar amount of air, which is, for people that are interested, is about 10.5 CFM. That's at 2 bar, so 29 PSI. So there's it's not actually that high for a full-size gun. Even something like the cheap R500 type gun that's touted as being a really good small compressor gun, you need to use that about 2.5 bar, and you'll be getting about 10.5 CFM. So it will be about the same as one of those. So they're actually good for smaller compressors, although they're not good for small compressors. None of them are going to work that well with small compressors unless you've got very little to do, in which case you're probably better off with a minigun anyway. But as I say, the base coat actually went on fine. We come to the clear coat now. So the clear coat I used on this, I what I call cheated a bit, in that I used a Mipa CX4, which is an express clear coat. It's relatively expensive over here now in the UK. It's about £200 for a kit, so a 7.5 litre kit. So it's relatively expensive. It's not as dear as some of the really expensive ones, but it's not a cheap clear coat. And the reason I use that is because it runs out, it flows out really nice, holds its gloss level very, very well, but it suits finer atomization. All the better quality clear coats tend to suit guns that have finer atomization, and that's because I'm presuming this is it, but you're firing, at the end of the day, you're firing very small little particles, and if the clear coat isn't up to flowing out really easily and nicely into each other, you've got to put a lot of those little particles to make enough of a build-up for it to flow out with the cheaper clear coats. Whereas with the better quality clear coats, you can get a nice thin film of a clear on there, get a really nice flat finish. You're not overloading the tip. You do end up saving material because you actually lose less. You need less to give you the same finish. Although if you're doing like I'm doing here and you're going to sand it afterwards, then you're probably better off using what I would normally do if I wasn't testing this tip. I would normally use something like the U-Pole clear coat. It's quite a cheap clear coat. Put 2 or 3 good coats of that on, and then sand it nice and flat, and then do your artwork. As I say, I use the term artwork very, very loosely, but do your decals or whatever you need to do if you're spraying them on with an airbrush, and then you can just put normally 1 good coat of clear. You can put 2 if you want to, but 1 good coat of clear should normally be fine, because you've already got the UV build up in the the underlayer clear that you've already put on there. So you know you're getting a normal, you know, a normal MS or most HS, a sort of two good coats of clear, or a tack coat and a good coat of clear. So you're going to have enough on there with just one coat of clear over your artwork. Would be perfectly fine. So that's the best thing to do, I find. You notice I'm heating the clear coat up here. I do often say this, I'll say it again, don't do this at home, because I'm sure it's not the thing to do and it's not completely safe. It is, however, what I do, and I use about 10 seconds per 100 milliliters of mixed clear coat. I've never had a problem doing it. I have actually, being old and senile like I am, I have actually put it in for a minute once instead of 10 seconds. I pressed 1 minute instead of 10 seconds. And I came back to the clear coat. Nothing untoward happened apart from ruining your clear coat, because when I came back to it, it was more or less solid. So that's effectively what it does. But I'm sure in some cases it could actually go up, or it could cause a problem. And obviously the stuff we use in the painting game is all highly flammable. So as I say, do not do that. Do not warm the clear coat up in that way. Anyway, you can use hot water, you can also use lots of things, but I do because it's very convenient, very quick, and it seems to work very well, and I've had no detrimental effects to it whatsoever. But it does help the clear coat run out better, or flow out better, and it does help it go off faster as well. And one of the benefits of the clear coat going off faster is that while you're waiting for it to dry or to cure, you know, you're open to the elements. So if a fly comes along and lands in something that's still tacky, then there's a chance that the fly will make a nasty little mess on your tank or your wing or whatever you're doing. Whereas if the clear's nearly gone off, there's much less chance of that happening. So it speeds the process up. Obviously, if you've got a whole truck to do, then you won't want it to go off so clear or so quickly. Although you'll soon get through 600 milliliters of clear coat, which is what a normal pot or a normal PPS pot would hold, and then you'll have to mix some more up anyway. So it should be absolutely fine for most stuff. The only time I actually come across a problem is rare occasions in the UK when it's warm, and you've got a lot of small parts to do, so the stuff will be in the gun for probably 30-40 minutes, and then I try and use what I've been using lately actually is a Capsi clear coat I've got, but it's got what they call a fast hardener, which is very much a standard hardener. I mean, it stays live for over an hour in the pot, so I use something like that, and that gets me through it absolutely fine. You know, just doing lots of small stuff because of the positioning. You can't, in my circumstances, I can't line it all up and do it at once, so I have to sort of like do something, move it, do something, move it, etc. But going back to the reason for the video, and I'm sorry I'm rabbiting on, I always do. Some people like it, some people probably drives them up the wall, but was to see if I got a better, flatter finish. And in all honesty, I don't think I did. In fact, I mean, the finish looks pretty good, but it's not as flat. There's a few nibs and that in it. I'm not quite sure why. I mean, I do get the odd one anyway, but they seem to be more than normal in this. But I didn't find that it was as good as the 1.2. So as far as that goes, the experiment actually failed, but I think it was worth doing. And I thought I would get the video up to show people, because at the time there was a little bit of interest in the fact that you know, we were exploring this thing of less is often better, and I think with this the 1.2 actually does fine. The 1.1 was actually quite good for base coat, and that would probably explain the reason with base coat. If I'm using the T110 or the T110 cap for base coat, I rarely have it on full fluid anyway, because I find that it's, for what I do anyway, it's just a little bit too much. It will obviously depend on colour, etc. but I find it a little bit too much. So that would probably lend itself, the fact that a 1.2 is doing better with base coat would probably lend itself to what I'm saying anyway. But I just don't think it really puts out quite enough in 1.1 with the clear coat, even with this Mipa clear coat, which, as I said, is a better quality clear coat. I still felt that it wasn't quite there. I mean, the results are pretty good. If you look at the end results, everything you see is off the gun, but if you look at the end results after the artwork's been applied, I can't remember what gun I used for that now. I think it was a Porpoise gun, but that actually looks really, really good. Although I say it myself, and again, that hasn't been touched, it hasn't been sanded or anything. The idea is to get as good a finish as I possibly can. I never normally show you anything that's been touched or altered in any way, so that's the whole point of my videos, really, is to show you what the gun can do, or what I can do with the gun and what the gun can do. So it's pointless showing you something that's finished and polished, I think, anyway, because it is not representative of what the gun can do. In theory, you could take a really bad gun that was giving you a really dry finish, but as long as you had enough product on there, you could sand it down so that it was flat, polish it up, and it would look as good as anything else. The idea of having a good gun to give you a good finish is to save you lots and lots of time. It really does save you lots of time. A lot of stuff I do is literally a couple of small bits of denibbing and it's good to go. And that just saves you so much time than doing it all, especially with bike stuff, because there's a lot of curves, a lot of angles, and you're just asking for trouble, keep having to sand all that down. But anyway, here's the finished job. As I say, sorry for rabbiting on, but we have got there in the end. I don't think it actually produces as good a finish as the 1.2, and I think that's just because it's just not getting enough material through. But for base coat, it actually works quite well. As you can see, the finish is quite good. It's the Mipa clear coat is actually very good. Its gloss retention is really good. So you see this here, and it does look nice and glossy, but as I say, I did cheat a bit in that I used a better quality clear coat. From memory, I think I paid about 25 GB pound for this, brand new. That's for the tip, by the way, nothing else. Brand new, but it was worth it to experiment and try. Although I don't think I will be using it that much. I've also got a 1.1 tip for the DV1, which again I've never used. I actually bought it off a paint rep, and I got 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and another one, I think 1.6 or something for the DV1. So I've got lots of different tips for that as well. But yeah, there's only a few you do tend to use. I'll just run through the gun settings, because people do often ask that. I virtually always use full fan, because I find cutting the fan back often has a detrimental effect on most guns. So I use it on full fan. I've obviously got the, I say obviously, but I've obviously got the fluid on full. If I'm saying to you it's not putting out enough fluid, it would be silly to have the fluid throttled back and then complain that I don't think it's quite putting out enough fluid. So the fluid was on full, and it was done at 2 bar, which is 29 psi, which I use on virtually all the Pro Lite caps. I've been experimenting with a bit less pressure on the T110, the HV25 cap, which seems to be working well at low pressure, but jury's still out on that. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video as always. Bye bye.